I'm Sarah McMurtry from Department of Education, New South Wales Public Schools. Life skills curriculum in a mainstream setting, professional development for teachers. What is life skills and which students should be accessing this pattern of study? Some students with special education needs, particularly students with an intellectual disability, may need to meet the mandatory curriculum requirements in Years 7 to 10 through courses based on life skills outcomes and content. The decision is made after exploring a range of adjustments to assist the student to access the regular course outcomes. If the adjustments don't provide sufficient access and participation, courses based on life skills outcomes and content can be considered in collaboration with the student's parents and carers. The purpose of this short film is to assist mainstream classroom teachers in the implementation of life skills outcomes and contents within their classrooms. The film will address three areas. 1. What teaching and learning activities for life skills outcomes and content look like in a mainstream setting. This could include alternative content and resources. 2. How a program can be developed that integrates both the regular course outcomes and the life skills outcomes. And 3. How to provide opportunities to assess and report on the achievement and progress of students undertaking courses based on life skills outcomes and content.
To start with, what we do is we look at each of the students who are going to be accessing life skills outcomes. We ascertain which of those outcomes they are going to be able to achieve. We're setting them up for success. Not every single one of the outcomes needs to be assessed over the course of the year. What we do is we look in consultation with the learning support teacher and with parents and caregivers, we look at their individual learning profiles and for each of the subjects, ascertain which of those outcomes are suited for those students. Then as we look at the program for the regular outcomes for Stage 5, we see where the learning opportunities are that we can parallel and what modifications we can make to the resources, to the choice of texts that we're studying. We then need to be modifying all of the language in those activities so that we can marry them up with the student's ability and with those life skills outcomes, checking that we are using the right kinds of language for questionings to make those activities accessible for those students. We're going to be looking at the length of time that we give the students to complete tasks. We're going to be looking at what it is we want them to create in order to demonstrate their learning.
This is an example of an opportunity to teach to the whole class where mainstream and life skills content and outcomes can be taught in the same lesson segment.
Guys, today we're going to do a lesson about visual analysis, analysing visual texts. We're going to be, just like we were last lesson, we're going to be focusing on relationships, the topic of relationships. I'm going to get you guys into pairs and we're going to do a Kahoot quiz. So I'm going to set the pairs. What I'm going to get you guys to do is to use the sheet that I gave you yesterday to help you out. Just you get your phones out, you're going to be in team of 2. A phone or a laptop between 2 people, please.
This is an example of an opportunity to teach the whole class where mainstream and life skills content and outcomes can be taught in the same class with modified resources. The classroom teacher will now explicitly teach content to the mainstream class. You'll notice that the students accessing life skills outcomes and content are working on a scaffolded, independent task with the assistance of a student learning support officer.
Gentlemen, we're going to have a look at this particular image here. Right? You can write all over this. This picture is yours to keep for reference.
The classroom teacher will now explicitly teach content to the students following a life skills pattern of study. You'll notice that the students who are working on mainstream outcomes are working on an independent task, supervised and occasionally assisted by a student learning support officer.
Alright guys, while they are getting those down, this sheet here might help you in connecting up those techniques there with what we want on the page just here. So have a look at these ones here. We've got, so that first one there is the high angle shot. It's talking about the angle between what the viewer can see and what the subject is. We've got the colour, right, and the salient point, that point that stands out the most for us. On that second image there, we've got some symbols. So we're going to use those techniques we can find in those images and we're going to try and find it on our illustration that I've given you of this man getting chased by this group. All right, so see if you can find these techniques on that page. Pick one person from the image that you think is the main person in the image. All right, you get to decide who that is. I want you to have a look at the facial expression. Draw a circle around that facial expression. They're close together, right? Let's circle that one. When we look at the content that we will be giving the students, we need to be looking what can be altered, what can be reduced, and what can be modified. In the lesson that I just taught, I used a separate resource for visual text analysis. The modified resource had completely different questions written there, seeking similar answers, but the language in them was completely modified. There was scaffolding for those answers, various options they could choose from. Rather than straight up describing what was in the foreground of the image, it was circle what's in the foreground of the image. And in order to have the students access those activities and feel like they were achieving the learning, all of those resources need to be altered or reduced or modified. The expectations of student learning is very similar. We're expecting that they will be trying their hardest. We're expecting they will be engaging with the learning lessons to the best of their ability. If you've got homework, you can expect homework to be completed. If you've got tasks that you need to be completed in the class, expect that it will be completed. It's the modification of the resource that we want to be looking for, the modification of the language, modification of the task, rather than lowering the expectations of what they will complete.
Programming. 1. Process. The teacher wrote a unit of work and added life skills outcome and content where it married up. 2. Content. The content was modified, altered and reduced. 3. Resources. The teacher used the same theme but found different novels, texts, images and worksheets. Sometimes the teacher modified the language on some of the tasks so it became accessible to all, allowing for the whole class to use the same resources at times. 4. Expectations. All students had the same expectations: to work hard, to try their best, use acceptable classroom behaviour, contribute in class and work on tasks as they were given. Content changed, expectations did not. The physical program. Students' profiles were added at the beginning of the program. Thereafter, each student was referred to throughout the document using their initials to marry them up to the outcomes they would be undertaking for the unit of work. The life skills outcomes were added in the same column as mainstream ones. Additional points were included in each lesson that catered for life skills outcomes and content. Resources were added and any alterations in language to make aspects accessible to all were noted and highlighted.
Once you have determined the outcomes that each of the students will be undertaking in the particular KLA, you look at the program that you already have created for that unit, for that stage. And that's where we look at which modifications, alterations, reductions we can be making. Those learning activities are recorded in the program in parallel. We're finding opportunities for one learning space where all students in the class can be completing parallel learning activities, and we put that on the program side by side or below it. That way you can enter the outcome on the program so that you can go back and track it once you're up to the assessment and reporting stage. The individual learning profile is entered into that mainstream program that you already have developed. You put it at the front, and that way every time you're referring to that specific student, you can use their initials next to each of the outcomes that they're achieving and record the date next to it. We can then use the assessment tracking sheet to record those dates that they achieved those outcomes in order to keep track of where they are at a point in time. Throughout the program, you want to be looking for learning activities that the students can demonstrate their ability to access those life skills outcome and content points. You can, rather than creating a formal examination or a formal assessment task that the rest of the class might be doing, you can base your professional judgment on their verbal responses, on any of the written or visual activities they do in class, or on your own professional observations. You can record those dates in your program, and at the end of the unit, you can update all of that information onto the assessment tracking sheet, which will ascertain whether or not the student at that time has achieved or not yet achieved that particular outcome. This is an example of a spreadsheet we can use to track the outcomes that the students are achieving. We as a faculty have decided that if they achieve the outcome twice, we can mark that off as has achieved, and until such time they are not yet achieved. Once you enter in 2 instances with details and dates, it automatically flips from no to yes.